Well, thank you. I'll try and be entertaining. Let's see. I don't think you can hear me. Can you? How about that?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right, great. Yeah, I'm John McDougall. And I think you said a lot about me in the introduction. I don't know what I need to say more, except for the fact that I've been in medicine more than a half a century. And I've personally taken care of over 12,000 patients. We run a internet-based program now. Thanks to COVID-19, we're chased out of the resort business, but you can find us at drmcdougall.com and see what we're up to these days. And I think really important for you to know is I'm the father of 3 children and the grandfather of 7 children. And that's a lot of my motivation as to why I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I love being a doctor, by the way. In fact, I often describe myself as the luckiest doctor in the world. Why? Because my patients get well. Let's see. Let's just get into the slide presentation. Hopefully, I'll stimulate some questions and maybe some enthusiasm. All right, here we go. Okay, so the title of this presentation is Diet is the common denominator for solving chronic disease, climate change, and COVID. We're always looking for high-tech solutions, or at least the general audience is looking for a high-tech solution. After all, we're a society that could wipe out the entire planet with atomic bombs. So we ought to be able to do anything, right? And that's the way I was raised, and I know a lot of people still think that way, but it's really low-tech solutions that are the real answer. For example, we have the COVID-19, pandemics after pandemic of COVID viruses. And, we rely on vaccinations and treatments, but, they've had serious limitations. You've been watching it and you've been hearing about it on the news. And still the basic things as far as preventing infectious diseases still hold. Like wearing a mask, washing your hands, social distances. Those are the low-tech solutions. I've spent 46 years taking care of patients with a dietary approach. I've been in medicine more than 55 years, but I've spent 46 years dedicated to solving people's problems with a good diet, a little moderate exercise and some sunshine. But I was taught to use high-tech solutions, lots of drugs, lots of surgeries, medical interventions. And I want to tell you, for chronic disease, these high-tech solutions are a failure. And these days, and what I'm going to dedicate a considerable amount of this presentation to, and hopefully I'll get your attention, is I want to talk to you about how we can deal with the real threat of climate change by low-tech efforts. We're not going to solve the problems with carbon capture. That's just silly stuff. It's about as silly as thinking we're going to be saved by galactic aliens coming down from outer space and fixing our atmosphere and our planet. It's not going to happen, folks. We've got to deal with this ourselves. All of these are connected. They're all connected to diet, chronic disease, climate change, infectious disease. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about, is how diet plays a dominant role in all these problems. But you got to realize when we're talking about all of these problems, there are financial issues and issues of personal appearance, and religious faith is involved in each of these issues. We're talking about loss of habitat and animal suffering and people suffering, and it's just a mess. So let's talk about chronic disease. That's where I've spent my whole career, more than a half a century, and 46 years treating people who have chronic disease with a good diet. I have whittled my program down as far as the teaching aspect to as simple as possible, to get people to make effective changes. And what I've done is I've put the problems in terms of food poisoning. Just like if you were going to come to me and you were drinking a bottle of gin a day, I tell you, look, you got alcohol poisoning, you got to quit it. And you know what to do, wouldn't you? Or if you came to see me with smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, what do I tell you? I tell you have tobacco poisoning. And you know what to do. I mean, it's a simple solution, isn't it? Well, I've tried to make it as simple when it comes to food poisoning so that you can act. And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. The things that cause food poisoning, I put into two categories. One, any animal foods. That means secretions like milk and cheese, and yogurt, and body parts of animals. That's one category of poison that you avoid. And the other are free oils. That means safflower oil, canola oil, olive oil, flaxseed oil, you name it, whatever health food oil you're selling, whatever day. Toxic. The diseases that result from food poisoning, you're familiar with them. Obesity and its various complications like high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart disease. That's food poisoning. Diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. But if I talk about diabetes today, or I'm going to give another presentation at the end of the week, I'm talking about type 2 diabetes unless I specify that it's type 1. And of course, both kinds of diabetes are associated with all kinds of complications like kidney failure, eye damage, and early death. It's a tough disease. Heart disease, we're talking about the involvement of 60,000 miles of blood vessels that stream throughout your body, all the way from hearing loss to heart attacks to strokes to impotence. Various kinds of arthritis are due to food poisoning. Cancers of the colon, breast, prostate, uterus, and probably most every cancer is influenced, at least somewhat, by what you eat and the health that you appreciate based upon your eating habits. This should be an easy one. What you put in your stomach causes it to be healthy or sick. Doesn't that make sense? Well, for a lot of people, they don't think about it. They just take Nexium or Prilosec or some kind of pill, and they think their problem is cured or solved. No, it's not. You're still putting food poisons in your stomach, and you're suffering from the various diseases, including GERD and indigestion, ulcers, etc. This one is particularly obvious to all of us who lived on the American diet. Bowel diseases. And the one that is so common people suffer from is serious and chronic constipation, which, by the way, I give a lecture on this. It's about how chronic constipation is the cause of a lot of other troubles people have, like hemorrhoids and varicose veins and hiatus hernias and prolapse of the uterus. And, a lot of injury to the body occurs as a consequence of something that you may consider a simple, although it's a very common problem. So how do you solve food poisoning? Well, for a lot of people, not this audience necessarily, for a lot of people, when I say you can't eat anything from animals and you can't eat any free oils, they look at me and they go, but there's nothing left to eat. You just took away everything. Well, probably everything that you've learned to eat, and you've learned to fear starch. But what I'm here to tell you is that you need to start thinking in terms of the fact that you are a starch eater, a starchitarian, a starchivore. The human body is designed to live on starches, and I'm going to show you why. And when I ask people to plan their meal, I ask them to not weigh, not look up in a handbook, not hire a dietitian. Just look at your plate. About 90% of the food on your plate should be starch. And the other 10%, non-starchy, green and yellow vegetables and fruits. We have in various places, McDougall Mobile Cookbook has 1,000 recipes. Our website probably has another 1,000 that are free. And we have 11 of our 13 national best-selling books have recipes in them. I would add it up to about 4,000 recipes available for next to nothing. We've been at this for a long time, folks. Let me show you some of the results of the kind of practice that I've had. This is scientific studies on the McDougall program, the McDougall diet. This is published. You can look up the research. So far, it's uncontested, even though it's been out for about 8 years. We studied 1,703 of our people. We didn't exclude anybody in this study. It was over a 10-year period of time. People who came to our resort-based program, our residential program. And what we found was the average weight loss, eating as much as they wanted, and they loved the food, was 3.1 pounds in 7 days. Cholesterol drops on average 22 milligrams per deciliter. You'd be hard pressed to get that from statin drugs. The average decrease in blood pressure in people who started with high blood pressure was 18 over 11 millimeters of mercury. And they started with high blood pressure, and most of them were on pills. And the next thing I feel really good about is that we got nearly 90% of people off their medications, particularly high blood pressure, diabetic medications. Ladies and gentlemen, sick people take drugs. Healthy people don't. A study done independent of us, totally independent of us, except for we were involved in the education. It was done at Oregon Health and Science University, which is the medical school in Portland. A 1-year study. The average weight loss was 19.1 pounds. And these are people who didn't come to the study interested in weight loss. Their primary objective was help with multiple sclerosis. Nearly a 20-pound weight loss, eating as much as they wanted for a year. That was average. Average cholesterol drop was 19 milligrams per deciliter. Pretty similar to what we got in the 7 days. We reduced their insulin levels, fatigue. And the interesting thing is we had a chance to study the compliance of these people. We had a chance to educate them at our live-in program. It was a 10-day residential program when we ran it before COVID-19. And, they had a whole year afterwards, not under our care, under the care of the neurologists, the doctors at Oregon Health and Science University. And yet, when we took a look at the data at 1 year, we found something that was really remarkable. And that is that 85% of people were compliant for a year. You can't keep people to be that compliant with drugs for a year. Now, why were they compliant for a year? Well, I like to think our education is top notch. But again, we only had them for a little more than a week for an entire year. The reason that they were so compliant is they got such dramatic benefits. And they liked the food. Totally independent of us. In fact, in another part of the world, the broad study was in New Zealand. It was a community-based study, and I didn't find out about the study until after it was done and published. But it used the McDougall diet, and so I'm going to tell you about it. They brag about having the best weight loss of any program out there, that people on average lost 25 pounds in 1 year. And they could eat as much as they want. Again, they got such dramatic results, and they liked the food, so they stuck with it. Cholesterol drops were about the same, about 20 milligrams per deciliter. They got off their medications just like in our 10-day program. And, they attended the meetings. 80% of the participants attended the meetings for an entire year. Again, it's really hard to get that kind of participation, but when you got a good program, you do. The way the program works is quite simple. Is we take advantage of the natural healing capacity of the body. What we do is we remove the injury, the damage. Like, for example, if you smoke cigarettes or you know somebody who smokes cigarettes, what do you have to do to cause them to heal themselves? They're always healing. I want you to think about this. The body's always trying to heal. I mean, this man is coughing and bringing up sputum because he's trying to defend himself from the poisonous tobacco. The body never lets you down. It always is trying to heal. So you quit smoking in this case, and what happens? About a week later, you stop coughing, and they tell us that in 7 years, you reduce your risk of lung cancer to the general population. So again, I want to emphasize that what we're doing is just taking advantage of something that's intrinsic. It's inside you. It's always going on. Even if you have cancer, doesn't matter. Heart disease, it doesn't matter. Your body's always trying to survive. It's one of those basic things of nature is survival. Now, in our program, what we do is we take advantage of the food, and we remove the foods that are causing people to be sick. I showed you what they were. They were any animal products and free oils. And the natural healing capacity of the body It expressed itself. It just came out. It was there, but you couldn't see it because the damage outstripped the healing capacity of the body. That's all. That's the miracle that's inside the patient. Each and every patient has this. So once you stop the injury, then the healing processes, they can catch up and surpass. And what you notice is you regain your health. It's really that simple. Climate change. In 2004, with the birth of my first grandchild, I changed my focus of interest from one of patients. As I mentioned to you, I personally have cared for over 12,000 patients. Now, it's not that I don't still care for 12,000 patients or still care for patients. I still do. I work at our telemedicine internet-based program that lasts over 12 days, and we run very actively, and I'm very much involved in that. So I still love being a doctor. But, as far as accomplishing what the causes of my patients' problems are and how to solve them, I think I pretty much got that figured out, at least to my satisfaction. And so I've taken on a new patient, and that's planet Earth. That's my main interest, is climate change, because it's the most pressing issue of any right now going on. I learned first about climate change from Al Gore. He had the documentary out called The Inconvenient Truth. And I bet many of you learned from him also in 2006. Well, he did a sequel that he came out with in 2017. And in neither of his presentations did he mention diet. Nothing about food. The problems were to be solved by taking care of fossil fuels and improvement in transportation, et cetera. You've heard it over and over again. Well, those efforts may have been enough when this first came out, or we first realized that climate change was a problem in the early 70s, but it's no longer enough. Experts tell us that even if we're able to bring carbon down to net zero, stop all of the carbon pollution, we're not going to save the planet. We have to do one more thing, and that's fix the food. And that was talked about first to the world in the FAO report called Livestock's Long Shadow. This is over 400 pages. You can find it on the internet. In this, what they told us was, and this was pretty shocking, was that 18% of the global warming gases were caused by the agricultural businesses. 18%, and that was shocking, compared to all transportation, which caused fewer than 14% of the CO2 in our atmosphere. But they didn't really tell people how to fix it. They brought it out that diet was a major player, but they didn't tell us how to solve it. What can we do? As a society, or maybe even as an individual person, what can we do to mitigate climate change? But it was a big step. And I wrote my first piece on the climate and diet back the same year, in 2006, after these two important bits of information came out, Al Gore and the Livestock's Long Shadow. It caused me to write An Inconvenient Truth, We're Eating Our Planet to Death. That was in 2006. That's when I really became aware of what was going on and that a solution needed to be found. And we're going to be talking about a solution. If you don't know what kind of trouble we're in, I'm going to leave that to somebody else to tell you. But you need to be brought up to speed, and you need to be asking the question, what can I do to get out of this trouble? In 2013, we had Robert Goodland talk at one of our advanced studies weekends. He was the environmental advisor for 23 years for the World Bank. Pretty important guy. He told us that was in 2013. He told us we had 3 years left before we passed tipping points that we couldn't correct. If he's right, we passed them a long time ago, but I think he's wrong. He, along with his World Watch Institute, they readjusted the FAO statistics, livestock's long shadow, and included things that they didn't include, and came to the conclusion that 51%, at least, of the damage to our environment was caused by agriculture, by the animal agriculture businesses. Let me be specific, animal agriculture businesses. Eat Lance's commission is probably the most respected body at discussing diet and climate. They came out first with their paper, at least the first one I saw was in 2019. They said we had fewer than 12 years left to fix the problems. That's basically what people are working on now, is we have until the end of this decade to solve the problems, or it's just going to be too late. Well, they focused on the problem, and that is the diet. They told us what to do. Well, sort of. They told us we need more plants, more starches, fewer animal foods, but not to cut them out completely. And they gave us really no practical direction on how to solve the problems. Scientific research is crystal clear. There's no argument about this, that what is damaging the environment is our animal agriculture. Plants, they're kind to the environment. In fact, they sequester CO2, don't they, when they grow? So I don't think you'll find anybody arguing when it comes to diet. Even in this conference, I don't think you'll find anybody arguing when it comes to diet as far as how we return the health of our planet and what diet is important. You may hear a lot of diverse points of view talking about low carb diets, high meat diets in terms of health. I don't agree with them. But I think everybody understands that you can't do anything on a dead planet. And so we got to fix this problem of poisoning the planet with animal agriculture. The planet can recover. It's always trying to adjust, to make adaptations. Just like my patients, it just has never stopped trying to be a good home for us human beings. Never. It's just that the damage outstrips its ability to heal, that's all. So sure, we got to stop the fossil fuel industry, absolutely. But it's no longer enough. And it will heal. So let's go on to the third topic, and that's COVID-19, the virus that has plagued us for the last 2 years. In fact, some real good came out of that for us, and that is we switched to an internet-based telemedicine program, which is far more beneficial and enjoyable. We get better results over the internet than we did by locking people up at a resort in Santa Barbara, California. So some good things came out of that. There's some very terrible things that came out of it too for most people. So I'd like to talk to you about viral infections in general and COVID-19 particularly, and the influence diet has. Before the virus escaped from China in 2019, the Chinese doctors had observed that many people who got this virus did just quite well. They were either asymptomatic or had mild disease. And then there were people who got really sick. They had to go to the hospital. They were put on mechanical ventilators and essentially drowned in their own fluids for the next 2 weeks before they died. They knew that before it came to the United States or Europe, that it was comorbid factors, the ones that I have treated as a medical doctor. It was the obesity and the heart disease and the kidney failure, the diabetes. These are things that the approach I use cures. But when you have these things, then you're not set up to defend yourself from this virus. The Center for Disease Control and CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, their findings were this, and this was back in July of 2020, maybe it was May of 2020. They came out and they said that if you have comorbid factors, which are obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, the things you get from being poisoned by the rich Western diet, then you have a 6 times higher rate of being hospitalized and 12 times the risk of dying. This again is a fact, not with any contradiction. As far as Europe goes, they have come to the same conclusion as we did here in the United States, and that is that if you're going to survive this viral infection, you're going to stay out of the hospital, you're going to stay off a ventilator, you're going to keep from dying, you need to take care of your health. And probably long before you got the infection, you should start taking care of your health. So again, this is a worldwide understanding of the importance of diet when it comes to viral infections. But what does diet do? It does all kinds of things. And, I don't know what they all are, but I know of a few of them. That's not really important. When you eat the rich Western diet, you suffer from food poisoning, and a whole bunch of the systems don't work very well. One of the thoughts has been that when you eat an unhealthy diet, and you hear a lot about this these days, people are talking about the microbiome, the intestinal bacteria, and how important they are. When you eat an unhealthy diet, what happens is you grow bacteria that destroy the integrity of your intestinal tract, so the virus more easily passes to your tissues. Yeah, that's one theory. Probably true. I would say it's true. The other thing that we talk about in terms of viral infections and cancer, et cetera, you probably heard a lot about this in the conference so far, are the importance of plant nutrients, phytonutrients. Well, I think they're really important too, as long as they stay in the plants. I think you take them out of the plants and you put them in bottles, I think you've lost it. Profitable, but you've lost it. So maybe it's the phytonutrients in all of our plant foods, in plants, in fruits and vegetables and starches. Maybe that's a big part. I think so. And one of the interesting findings was the role of cholesterol. Remember, we dropped cholesterol in 7 days, 22 milligrams per deciliter. We unburdened the body of cholesterol just with diet. Some important research that came out showed that cholesterol was integral in allowing the virus to be highly infectious and damaging. And what they discovered was there were bridges that allowed the virus to come through the one cell membrane that separates the blood from your tissues. And these bridges, they're ACE tubing bridges. And what happens is the COVID-2 virus, it goes through these rafts, these lipid rafts, these ports to get through into the bloodstream. And the bridges are made wider and more common if you have a high burden of cholesterol. The medical profession really jumped at this one, and they could understand it. Doctors understand drugs. And so when the research came out that taking statin drugs would reduce the risk of dying in severe disease by 30 to 50%, doctors understood, because they were dealing in an area that we are so expertise in, and that's drugs, medications. But the right way to do this is to lower cholesterol by changing your diet. And you know that cholesterol is only present in animal foods to a significant amount. And I showed you we dropped the cholesterol in 7 days, more than 20 milligrams per deciliter. And people maintain these drops for over a year. They unburden their body of cholesterol that opens the bridges that allow the virus into the body. All right, so I've talked to you so far about chronic diseases, diabetes and high blood pressure, obesity, cancer, heart disease, and so on. And I've just started to introduce you to the idea of climate. And we've talked about, and you've experienced it in the last 2 years, what ravage can occur worldwide from a viral infection, and how important it is in all three of these areas to eat a good diet. the question that comes up now is, will people do it? Will they do it to prevent themselves from getting really sick when it comes to a virus? Well, how about will they do it to stop their diabetes, reverse their heart disease, have a good bowel movement, relieve their constipation? Will they do it? Well, I don't know. I've been trying to get them to do it for a long time, but with some success, a lot of success. And how about when it comes to saving the planet? Will we do it? Okay, are we able to make that kind of change? Because knowing all this information doesn't do us a whole lot of good, does it? Unless we're willing to do something about it. Well, I'm here to tell you, we have the potential to do something about it because we've done it in the past. We've changed. Millions of people have changed when it was necessary, and we can do it again. This comes out of World War I. During World War I, a big battle was between Britain and Germany. And the people in England set up the British blockade in the North Sea, which was essentially to stop importation of anything to Germany. It was very successful. But unfortunately, other countries, they were involved in this blockade also, like Denmark. You see where Denmark's located on the map? And so Denmark was in big trouble. Well, the Danes, they changed their diet. And as a result of changing their diet, they went through this period of time without suffering at all. In fact, they benefited. Whereas the Germans who stayed with a well-balanced diet, made sure they got enough meat and dairy, even though there wasn't really enough. They starved to death. In fact, 400,000 Germans died of malnutrition during that period of time. So what did these Danes do? Well, they were under the leadership of a very famous doctor, Mikhail Hinhidi. Mikhail Hinhidi, by the way, he had come to the conclusion, as other scientists did at that time, come to the conclusion that the need of protein in the human being is so low that it never has to be considered. It's impossible to design a protein deficient diet. They knew that 120 years ago. Well-educated people know that again today. It's impossible to design a protein deficient diet. So he didn't have any hesitation of asking his fellow countrymen, 3 million of them, to stop eating the animals. And instead, he asked them to eat the foods the animals were eating, and they did. The potatoes, the grains, the soybeans, yeah. In Denmark, the pigs died of starvation, but people received adequate nutrition, he said. And he also said that the starvation in Central Europe wouldn't have happened if they would have adopted similar principles. Mikhail Hinhidi. His work was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1920. You can read the article. It's freely available on the internet. And in this article, you'll find the publication of what happened to the Danes during this period of time, during World War I. Thrived. They had better health during this period of time than they ever had before World War I or after World War I. There was a 34% reduction in death overall. You can see the chart here. I want you to notice also the purple line. Even infections, death from infections went down. Well, at that time during World War I, same period of time, we had the Spanish flu. You remember? You learned it in history. Sure you did. About how 50 to 80 million people died worldwide from the Spanish flu. And they had low-tech, the same effective methods of dealing with it that we have now. Nothing's really progressed as far as these low-tech methods of wearing masks and social distancing, washing your hands. Look what happened to the Danes during that period of time. They had the lowest death rate from Spanish flu of any European country. All right, so COVID-19 to me has been the comet. You've seen the movie, right? Don't Look Up. It has been the comet that has caused people to look at the ability to change, and the fact that we are malleable. We can make a difference. And so over the last couple of years, some amazing things have happened to our society and around the world, haven't they? Some positive, a lot of them very negative. But one of the positive things was the fact that the climate improved during that period of time. The Chinese research shows that the season of growing improved, more coverage, more green coverage of their lands during the time of COVID-19. When we cut down on transportation, we dropped the pollution of the atmosphere by about 10%, and you could see it. The earth, it was recovering. We reduced the damage, and we could see the recovery. So, we talked about infectious disease, chronic disease, and climate change. And, being well-informed, you have the underlying factor that you can control. You can fix your diet. You have the possibility, given the right kind of information, you could fix it. And the influence will be huge. In fact, it'll be of greater influence than anything I can imagine us doing. The damage done with a bad diet, which is a rich American diet, to you personally, to your community, to your country, and to your planet, is far greater than the damage done by alcohol, heroin, cocaine, tobacco, all put together and rolled into one. Diet is so important. Now, let me talk to you about my new passion, which is diet therapy for planet Earth. Yeah, diet therapy, that's a term, it's just like starch. When I came out with the idea that you ought to be talking about starch, my book editor said, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. I said, people need to learn the term starch. That's what it's called. It was industry that perverted the name and changed it to complex carbohydrates. Can you identify a complex carbohydrate, your gardener, on your plate? Well, your grandma could identify a starch, because that's what they used to call it: rice, corn, potatoes, breads, and pastas. And that's what I've used as diet therapy to help my patients. Well, we developed a website, and I'm going to encourage you to visit it. It's in progress. And it needs your attention. It needs to be spread as much as possible, because we have a world to save. And that website can be easily reached at McDougallFoundation.org, not .com, but .org. And what you're going to find on this website that we've been developing over the past year is you'll find a storybook filled with optimism. You've got to be overwhelmed with the negative reports. You have to be. Don't you want to? Would you rather hear about we're condemned and we don't have a chance? Would you rather hear about what we can do? Even if there's just a small chance that what we do will make a difference. I'm certainly not going to stop fighting. So let's talk about what we can do. And that's what this website is dedicated to. It's the food. Put together a few studies for you, and I want you to take this presentation and stop it along the way so that you can look these up. That's why I put them there for you. That's why I put the references there for you. I want you to read them. The first thing I want you to read is the present state that we are in. And that is a situation I've tried to emphasize to you over and over again, is that we passed the point where we can solve this by just stopping pollution of the environment, getting rid of fossil fuels, solar, wind. We've gone past that. We have to do that, but it's too late. If we don't want to have an unlivable planet. When we first started talking about climate change, or at least I remember, It was something in the distant future. You remember, it was like, we didn't have to worry about it. Our kids would be dead. Our grandkids would be dead. It was like 100 years from now. It was the next century that we'd have to worry about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the polar caps have melted. There's still a little bit of ice left, but forest fires are everywhere, wildfires and droughts and hurricanes. And excuse me, if you haven't noticed what's going on, then you're asleep. And a lot of people talk about how it'll be 2050. We got to 2050. Good grief, what is that? That's all, almost 30 years. We don't have to worry about it. But, people who are real serious, they'll tell you, like Goodland and E-Lancet Commission, they'll tell you we don't have until 2050. I hope we have until 2030 because that's the plan. The plan is to get this world to change to a diet that will support planet Earth. And I'm going to talk to you about that diet. So you start with this particular paper, which is a classic. All the papers I'm showing you are classics. And you face the fact that the only way we're going to get out of this trouble, the only way your children, and not just your grandchildren, your children are going to have a future, is to take advantage of what I'm going to show you next. Because we have powerful medicine, but it has to be done. Can we do it? The Danes did it 100 years ago. 3 million of them. Can 7 billion people do this? I don't know. I bet with your help we can. I bet so. Let's see. This particular paper says that a vegan diet leads to an 83% reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions from the current levels. And I want you to notice that if you do this as a person, this is an overnight reduction in your contribution to global warming. Overnight. I want you to read that paper. And this one out of the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, they found that reductions are available at a range of 62 to 78%. And you'll read that paper and you'll see that, various genders and the two genders and various age groups, they got different results, but a 62 to 78% reduction overnight in greenhouse gases. Lancet Planet Health. Lancet is one of the most respected journals in the world. They tell you can reduce overnight, you as an individual, up to 84% of your contribution to greenhouse gases. There aren't very many naysayers out there. I'm showing you the bulk of the research. Public Library of Science, independent organization that puts out some of the most highly respected scientific papers ever. And they report if we change our diet, we end animal agriculture, we can stabilize greenhouse gases and offset 68% of the CO2 emissions that are going on now. Don't you feel encouraged? Don't you feel like there's something you could do? I sure do. Here's another paper from the Public Library of Science. It showed reductions of 70% in greenhouse gas emissions by switching to a vegan diet. We're going to talk about that word vegan in a minute. But you get the point. When you give up the animals and their body parts, you're talking about the vegan diet. The same diet that I use my interpretation of a vegan diet that I use to help 12,000 people. Personally, I helped 12,000 people regain their lost health. And hopefully we've helped hundreds of thousands more that I didn't have the opportunity to see as my personal patients. The Lancet Commission, published in the Lancet, the most respected medical journal in the world just a couple of years ago. Plant-based diets could reduce emissions up to 80%. Excuse me, don't you feel empowered? Don't you feel like you want to go out and change your sister, your brother, your mother, your dad, your children, your People in your church. I sure do. Environmental research letters, 81% reduction overnight. Lancet Planet Health, here's another one of their papers. And this is about the lowest I could find as far as the benefits go. Nearly a 50% reduction in greenhouse gases. So, kind of put it together and just say you can reduce your contribution of pollution to the environment by 80% by changing from the Western diet, which I realize many have already made these changes. You have, I know. And I'm speaking to the choir, so to speak. But you have friends and relatives who haven't. And the potential is huge. And probably the most optimistic paper and probably the most thorough paper shows an 87% reduction in greenhouse gases. You should take the trouble to read this. I'll give you the reference to all these places. All these papers are open access. You can read them for free. They're so important that the journals and the authors of these papers presented them for free on the internet for you. You can read every one of them, and I want you to. Okay, so what we're talking about is this. We're talking about a change back to traditional eating patterns. We're not talking about anything new. Okay, we're talking about going back to the way we used to eat. We're talking about the caloric engines of human civilization that have been going on for, let's guess, close to 1 million years. Okay, 750,000 years. Okay, you can argue whatever you want as far as the number. It's been going on a long time. What was the diet of the Aztecs and the Mayans, Central America? And the American Indian, by the way, the Native American, what was their diet? Well, the Native American was mostly potatoes. But corn was a big part of their diet too. And the people in Central America are known as the people of the corn. They survived as civilizations for 1,300 years on corn. They fought battles, they had babies, they competed athletically. They lived and died on corn. No refrigerators, no transportation. Very few animals. You can't call them vegan. I know you can't call them vegan, but they were starch eaters. They lived on starch-based diets. Asia. What do you think about when you think about people in China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Japan? What do you think about when you think about their diet? I know it's changed since 1980. But I mean, what was the tradition? What did they fight World War II eating, the Japanese? They almost beat us in World War II, And the Vietnamese conflict, they did beat us on rice, didn't they? So the diet in Asia, at times and in parts, was rice for more than 10,000 years. We're watching stories about Ukraine these days, aren't we? Russia and Ukraine, and they say this is the breadbasket of the world because they produce most of the wheat still today for Europe and other parts of the world. The breadbasket of the world, but that part of the world is known as the breadbasket. Why would they call it the breadbasket? What do you think they raise there? What do you think the food is there in the breadbasket of the world? Egypt, Iraq, Iran, the breadbasket of the world. And they've supported their civilization on barley and wheat has been their primary intake of food. Well over 90% of their diet, except for the rich people. Oh yeah, the kings and the queens and the aristocrats, they didn't eat the people that built the same food as the people that built the pyramids or toiled in the fields. No, they're not going to eat the grains and the potatoes, things like that. They're going to feed them to the pigs and the cows and the birds, and then they're going to eat those animals. Well, that's why the aristocrats of old are obese and sick, gout in their feet. Yeah, pretty consistent, isn't it? South America. 13,000 years, we can date potato eating as the primary food. The Incas fought battles, had babies, raised families, competed in athletics on potatoes. Oh, let me take that back. They gave up the potatoes when they had to leave home for battle. Yeah, the potatoes were too heavy. Instead, they carried along quinoa. That's what they fought their battles on, was quinoa. Every religion that I'm aware of, in their writings, they teach how rich foods make people sick. That's the problem. Rich foods make people sick because rich foods are basically food poisons. I have to go back to the Bible because it's most familiar to people in the United States and Europe. And story there 2,600 years ago. It survived the test of time, hasn't it? They wouldn't keep telling if it didn't have some truth to it. The story about how Daniel came to a new kingdom with his men. And at this kingdom, they were serving meat, rich foods too, and desserts and whatever dairy they had, and primarily meats. And Daniel said, I'm not going to do this, and my men aren't going to eat that way. And he went further. He asked the gatekeeper, he says, let's compare your men who eat the royal food with our men who are going to stick with our diet of pulses and water. And they did it for 10 days. This is the first controlled trial ever published that I'm aware of. Controlled trial on how rich foods make you sick and how eating pulses and water or vegetables and water maintain your health in the Bible. People are described as stronger, better complexions. I mean, overall, just generally better health when they stuck to pulses and water. A starch-based diet, that's what they stuck to. If you look around the world, you find throughout history, then all large populations, let me say this again because I want to start out, make sure you hear me correctly. All large populations of people, successful people, throughout verifiable human history, have obtained the bulk of their calories from starches. I mean, think about it. I went through some of these with you. Yeah, no matter where you look, it's the same story. As I say, we didn't have refrigeration or transportation. We could grow crops, gather. We aren't very good at gathering dead animals. This has been going on for all of human existence, and the rich Western diet's been going on for 150 years worldwide. Yeah, I told you, the kings and queens, the aristocrats, they ate it 5,000 years ago. The pharaohs did. And they suffered. They suffered from the same diseases that we suffer from today because they ate the same foods 5,000 years ago. There are a few exceptions. I know there are people out there thinking, well, you didn't cover everybody. No, I didn't cover the Inuit Eskimo, who lives on the extremes of the environment. You can't eat a starch-based diet if you're going to live in these freezing climates. When you lived in igloos and you went out and caught your food. That's not the who lives in Alaska. No, they live in heated houses and drive around in heated SUVs. And when they go fishing, what they do is they go through the drive-through and hand the person at the counter a green lure. And that's how they catch a fish, with a green lure. Some of the worst health of any place on the planet, and some of the worst environmental damage is occurring to these people. So, how do I approach this to make people feel most comfortable about it without it causing any offense? You know how most of the population, you say the word vegetarian, I don't know, they're getting a little comfortable with it. Not much. You really want to push your friends and relatives, you use the word vegan. course, vegan means lots of things. You could live on Cokes and potato chips and be vegan. You could be vegan and be obese, eating the cheesecakes and the fake foods and all that good old olive oil, right? Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe vegan is not the right word to use. How about a whole food, plant-based diet? Well, again, that's not specific enough for me. How about if we called it the McDougall diet? Then, of course, you'd stay way away from it, right? As somebody who's somehow trying to enrich himself, right? McDougall. How about if we called it a starch-based diet? Well, that's what I call it. Until I took on planet Earth as a patient. And then I felt like I had to appeal to as many people as possible. And so what I'd like you to call is the same thing I call it, which is a traditional diet. And the people you know, they have grandma and grandpa at home eating their traditional diet. You do. And they're in good health. When I lived in Hawaii, my native Hawaiians, some of the most obese, sick people in the world, except for their grandma and grandpa who lived on taro and breadfruit. They were hearty and healthy and working in their 90s in the fields. Or how about my Asian patients, who, again, some of the sickest, baldest, overweight people I've ever met. We're talking about contemporaries of my age or younger. Well, maybe younger, maybe just younger. They're sick, but they got grandma and grandpa at home just doing fine. Reading books, toiling in the garden, taking care of the grandkids, yeah, on rice. Why don't we call it a traditional diet? How about our Hispanic population? You know, it wasn't up until they moved to the United States or Mexico City became, wealthy with its particular share of junk. What did they live on? What did their grandma and grandpa eat, huh? Corn, beans, squash. That's their native diet. That's a traditional diet. Now, we could do this all day long. Your grandma and grandpa or their grandma and grandpa lived on starch. Unless they were kings and queens. They lived on starch. This is so simple to just go back to what we have always done. I think so. The website I set up, which I've encouraged you to visit, is the McDougallFoundation.org, McDougallFoundation.org. And we present there everything free. Everything is optimistic too. There, people have suggested I put up some of these gloom and doom videos about what trouble we're in. Ladies and gentlemen, you can get that every place you turn. You don't have to come to us. You come to our website, you'll come to a website that speaks of optimism, of what we can do, what we have to do. We provide everything for free. We'd like your help. Right? We really would like your help. We need your help. So what are we going to do, folks? Well, I think it's well past time that we had a revolution. Well past time. I lived in the day when we burnt our draft cards and marched in the streets to keep out of Vietnam. We got bigger trouble than Vietnam back then. Where's the revolution? Well, you better start now or soon, because climate change is not waiting for us. No, it's not. It doesn't really care. It doesn't care what your politics are. It doesn't care whether you're rich or poor. Climate change is its own monster, but it can be slowed or stopped. It can be. Let's take our planet back. I think so. Be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much for all of this, Dr. McDougall. Really, really appreciated everything you put into this, and very meaningful in so many different ways. Is that website the best place to find all of your books? Where do you recommend everybody goes for those?
That is a site put up by my foundation,
Okay.
McDougall Research and Education Foundation, and so it's separate from our for-profit website. And the for-profit website, where you get involved in the 12-day internet program, you could buy some books. Why not buy them on Amazon? Don't go to us to buy books. Go to us if you want us to take care of your 12 days and get you off your drugs and get you out of trouble. We do that. We do that extremely efficiently. You saw the published data. So, but we need to keep the websites separate because one is supported by the foundation. The other is a for-profit website. So drmcdougall.com is our for-profit website, and mcdougallfoundation.org is the one that is dedicated to optimism, to saving the planet. Do I think we'll make a difference? Yeah, I really do. I'm certainly sure if we didn't put the effort we're putting into it now, we wouldn't make any difference at all. You have to try. I'm not going to stop trying. I'm nearly 75 years old. Whatever time I have left, I'm going to try and make the world a better place.
Thank you for that. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get into our Q&A session. I want to make sure everybody here understands how we go about that here at The Real Truth About Health. So for those of you that might have a question for Dr. John McDougall, we ask you to raise your virtual hand. If you're not sure how to do that, what you do is you look at your Zoom window and you'll see different tabs. And one of those tabs is called your Reactions tab. So you click on your Reactions tab, and there you'll see a function that says Raise Hand. Click on Raise Hand, and we'll see your hand raised. And I'll go ahead and I'll call on you in order and ask you by your first name and unmute you, and you'll come on in. So with that, I already see one raised hand coming in from Michelle. And Michelle, you are on with Dr. McDougall. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Hi, Dr. McDougall.
Hi.
So I actually help people with plant-based nutrition as part of my business. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist. And the answer that I always get when I raise some of the excellent points that were in your presentation and also demonstrated from Blue Zones, et cetera, is that the corn and the rice and the potatoes of our ancestors is not the same corn, rice, and potatoes that is farmed today and that's available for us today. And therefore it's not healthy and it's a source of allergy, et cetera. So the whole glyphosate issue aside, what is your answer to that?
Well, there's a little truth in everything, but this is a dangerous, disastrous distraction to be focused on what Monsanto is doing. The earth is burning in hell while we focus on that problem, GMOs. Not that there's not a real issue here, but I've never met a patient with GMO disease, never heard of one either. Or another one that bothers me, I might as well offend all of you right now, is the fixation we have on gluten. You go to the grocery store and about 30-40% of the packaged products are sold to you that's gluten-free. How many people have gluten problems? I know, you think everybody does. Well, as a scientist, I don't. Celiac disease occurs in 1 in 100 people at most, maybe 1 in 250 that eat the Western diet. And we know how to take care of those few people who have a serious problem. We just keep them away from wheat, barley, and rye. Why are the rest of you focusing on GMO and gluten-free? Why are you doing that? When you should be focusing on the meat department, the dairy department. That's the real threat to your health, to your risk of catching COVID-19, and to the salvation of the planet. That's what I think, but I'm not here to win a popularity contest.
Thanks very much for that, Doctor. And again, folks, if you have a question, just click on your Reactions tab and raise your virtual hand from there. At the moment, that's the only question I have. But
I scared them all away.
I have a feeling they're coming, but I've got a big list of questions for you. So.
That would be fine. Otherwise, I can make some up because I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to your group.
I appreciate it. Well, I tell you what, before is there something specific that you'd like to review with us that you have in mind?
Yeah, I would like to talk to you about a few things. So, those papers I showed you, some of them balanced saving the planet versus causing nutritional deficiencies. And they call them unacceptable diets, starch-based. And what they're talking about is going real vegan. And these learned people, these scientists, these researchers, they claim such concerns as protein deficiency, calcium deficiency, zinc deficiency, a whole bunch of nonsense. And the whole issue of they have one ingredient that they have some honesty with, and that's B12. But that's pretty simple to deal with too. So, we got to get over this. The industries have created fears in us that make us buy products that are killing us. I mean, how many cases of protein deficiency have you folks run across? I've looked through the scientific literature, the historical literature. I can't find a single one. Mikhail Hinhidi, over 100 years ago, he told the Danish government, we don't have to worry about protein. There's no such thing. The requirement is so low, you cannot meet it. You always have adequate protein. I've done that for 100 years. There's a whole lecture I give. I think you guys would have a lot of fun with. It's about how our protein requirements are based on bigotry. They were determined by Carl Voigt and a bunch of his buddies in the mid 1800s. What they did is they said that people would naturally, inherently choose the right foods. And the only people who were able to choose the right foods were rich people. Okay, because they had the money to buy things, right? So rich people. So what they looked at is people who had money, which were primarily white people. And they found out that they chose a lot of meat and dairy and so on. And they figured that we'd choose innately the right thing, like people do at Burger King and Taco Bell and McDonald's these days, right? And at that time, they realized that there was a whole segment of the world, in fact, more people than those who could afford to eat, that couldn't afford to eat it. These are the people that were working in the fields, tending the crops, who were living on rice or corn or potatoes. They ignored these people. They were taking in a third as much protein as is recommended today. And they worked hard. Your protein needs are based on bigotry. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of that bigotry still spills over into your conference. And there are people who are emphasizing protein. I don't want to tread on anybody else's territory, but you want to talk about nonsense. The idea that you need more protein is one of the most evil things that ever happened to our planet and to you as an individual. It's evil.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated. And in fact, while you were saying that, we do have a few raised hands now. So if it's okay,
I'd love to talk to folks.
Excellent. So we'll bring in Steve first. Steve, welcome.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. You're right. You scared us off. It's like a deer in the headlights. Your passion and your commitment, and you've been there for us our whole lives. You changed us into this way of life. You inspire us. You educate us. And the idea that you could ask a question to Dr. John McDougall, oh my God, it's like debating Abraham Lincoln.
Thank you.
God bless you. You are awesome. Question: omega-3, flax seeds, walnuts, the foundation of brain health, good health.
Yeah, that's what you're promoting.
That's my question.
For self supplements. It's nonsense. The human being is very capable of changing omega-3 fats, alpha-linoleic acid, into DHA and EPA. We have no trouble doing it at all. What's promoted is fish and fish oils initially. No fish can make an essential fat. It's impossible. No animal has the enzymes to desaturate at the carbon-3 or the carbon-6 position, which are the two kinds of fats that we consider essential fats. No animal can do that. No fish can do that. Only plants can do that. Only plants can make omega-3 fats. So how do fish get omega-3 fats? They eat seaweed, algae. They get it from the plants. Well, why don't you just go to the plants and get it? This idea of having extra oil to solve problems, I don't agree with it. For one thing, the fat you eat is the fat you wear. I know you've been told other things, but the fat it goes from your lips to your hips, folks, and there's nothing attractive about wearing omega-3 fat. just like corn oil fat. Anyway, you'll get the fat you eat's the fat you wear, no matter what the source. Pigs, cows, nuts, seeds, avocados. And by the way, I want to say nuts and seeds and avocados are healthy. It's just that they're very calorie dense and 90% fat. So they're not food for these folks that are trying to lose weight. That's actually a whole chapter in a book that you have to promote, which is The Starch Solution, which is one of my favorite books. There's a whole chapter in there called The Fat Vegan. And really, to date, nobody's ever come back to me and said, that was a terrible thing for you to say, because I think people who are really interested in the environment, and they are, and interested in animals, which they are, I mean, this is really important. They can't properly convey their message to their friends and their relatives because they're unhealthy looking. And people say, well, why should I listen to your message about saving the animals and saving the planet when I end up looking like you? So I wrote the chapter in an effort to take already dedicated people and put them in a position where they can really make the difference, which they could and should. Certainly better than if they present themselves as unhealthy looking people. Anyway, thanks for what you had to say.
Thanks, Dr. McDougall. Up next, we have Stacy. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. John took my question.
Right.
I think we're all just kind of like starstruck, like, oh God, we get to ask Dr. McDougall a question. So I have a question about potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Potato skins. Do you think that we should be including them? Do you think that people are, yeah, I mean,
As long as they're not spoiled.
As long as they're not spoiled. Okay.
Yeah, you can eat them. If they become spoiled, in other words, they develop a green pigmentation under the skin, where you run a risk of solanine poisoning, which is due to spoiled potatoes. And you'll get a little sick, not terrible sick, but it's certainly a reason not to eat spoiled potatoes. And you can decide that they're spoiled by the fact that they have buds. And when you peel them, they're green underneath the skin. But otherwise, potatoes are and they have been the worldwide pillar of nutrition.
Yes.
For hundreds of thousands of years. Certainly at least 20, 30,000, 40,000 years. There's work, it's called the Four Corners potatoes. It has to do with the four states that come together at Four Corners in the Southwest. I can't tell you which four they are. But it was the diet of the Native Americans of this country, four-cornered potatoes, 12,000 years ago. If I was going to pick one food, and it may come to this someday, one food that was going to cause me to personally survive tough times, and the population or whatever is left of it, or planet Earth to survive, I'd pick the potato. You get more calories, more protein, more vitamins, more minerals per acre than you do of any other starch. You can grow potatoes in wetlands and dry lands, seashores and mountaintops. They'll grow any place, different potatoes. There are like 600 different species of potatoes.
Yeah.
I would pick the potato. I think in fact, the potato is known as the anti-scurvy vegetable. So you can live on potatoes and water alone. And I gave a presentation, it's on our website, about potatoes. And I talked about various populations of people who lived on potatoes. Did real well.
Yeah. Okay. So on the scurvy, just back to vitamin C. And I could Google this, but I want to ask you, do you know if there is more vitamin C in the skin of potatoes?
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. And believe me, potatoes are like the best food in the world. So I agree with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me divide starches for you into two categories. There are above ground storage organs, starches. What the plant does is it takes carbon dioxide from the air, water from the ground, and with the energy of sunlight, photosynthesis, it makes sugar. It uses some of that sugar to be a plant, and then it stores some of the sugar to rejuvenate itself. And these are called starches. Above ground storage organs are seeds, in other words, grains and legumes. They grow above the ground. And those do not have sufficient vitamin A and C in them. So you have to have a little bit of vegetable and fruit matter. How much is a little bit? Well, maybe a slice of orange a day or a flower of broccoli. But below ground storage organs, in other words, those that grow below the ground, like potatoes and roots and bulbs and corms, they're complete. They got everything in them, except for, of course, B12. And if you're not very hygienic, you get a little B12. But I do recommend B12 supplements. Just to be clear, I recommend that for some reasons that are important, for some reasons that you might not think are important. But you can't criticize what I do based on protein or calcium or omega-3 fats or, this or that vitamin or whatever. You can't do it. But you can say something negative about B12. But you got to put it in perspective, ladies and gentlemen. It takes 20 to 30 years to run out of your B12 stores if you're otherwise a healthy person. It's required in minuscule amounts. B12 is made by bacteria. We just don't live we live too hygienically. We don't live like people naturally live. They went out and pulled the vegetables out of the soil and shook them off, and all those bacteria that grew on the roots, they make B12. And they came into the house and they took their vegetables and put them on the counter. Well, before they were able to put them on the counter, they had to scrape the chicken off the counter. And he or she left some deposits of B12 for you. We may live too hygienically, but just whatever, you can look at the arguments that I give on my website. I've got 2 major articles on B12 that'll set you straight, I think. What we do is I've recommended since my first book that if you're going to be on the McDougall diet for more than 3 years, you add a supplement of B12. How much? Well, 5 micrograms a day. How much do you need? 0.5 microgram a day, but I've increased it by 10-fold. What do you buy in the store? 500 micrograms, 5,000 micrograms. There's a reason why. But anyway, B12 is the only criticism that I have to be concerned about, because it's the meat eater's last stand. They can't say anything bad about the fats and the proteins and the minerals and any of the vitamins except for B12. And I just want to put that aside. And so, in addition to me thinking it's important, and Mary and I have B12 in our bathroom, I want you to know that you don't have a lot to worry about for quite a while. You can figure out where your B12 comes from for a while, but we do recommend it.
Thanks very much, Doctor. Up next, we have Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. And first, a personal thank you to Dr. McDougall. My father's alive today at 79 years old. For almost 30 years ago, he came out to see you after his heart attack, and your starch-based diet has kept him going strong. He's still riding his bike and exercising, so really appreciate that.
Well, before you continue, I just want you to know that your story made my day. We take care of thousands of people over a period of time of 10 to 12 days. But when I hear, like your dad, when I hear stories, somebody says, I heard a lecture you gave at St. Francis Hospital in Honolulu 40 years ago. And I want you to know that my friends are in assisted living facilities, dead. They have disability stickers. I want you to know that I'm out like your dad, walking and running. And I really feel like I've done my job. And your story, it was very important to me. Thank you.
Well, you shouldn't feel like you've done it. You've done it tens of thousands of times over. So thank you. Could you discuss the complications or benefits that you've seen in your practice with the starch-based diet with relation to irritable bowel disease, specifically Crohn's disease? Thank you.
I think you're talking about an inflammatory bowel disease, which is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. It's different than irritable bowel. Irritable bowel is constipation and diarrhea and cramps and all kinds of stuff. Inflammatory bowel disease is a very serious autoimmune disease. And I hate to keep referring you, but I will. If you go to YouTube, there's a lecture I gave on autoimmune diseases, and I discussed inflammatory bowel diseases. This is where the body attacks itself. Just like we've heard about recently about alopecia, loss of hair. You know what I'm talking about. The body attacks the hair follicles. And somewhere around 20-30% of women out there in their 40s, you've got autoimmune thyroiditis. The body attacks itself. You ask yourself, why would the body attack itself? This sounds really dumb. Well, there are some reasons the body attacks itself, and I go through these in the lecture. But I think what you want to hear is, can you resolve Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease? And the answer is yes, you can. It's published in the scientific literature. Certainly not enough research has been. There's never enough research done on diet because there's no money behind it. This is just plain simple fact is money drives everything. How are you going to sell potatoes to people? When you can sell pills and shots that cost $70,000 a year. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. But yeah, if you change to a healthy diet, and that lecture on autoimmune diseases, which is on YouTube, just put in McDougall and autoimmune disease, that they'll show you the evidence behind it and the mechanisms and so on.
Thanks very much for that, Dr. McDougall. And now we're going to go on to Ainsley. Welcome, Ainsley.
Hi, everybody. Afternoon. Yes, doctor. Your potato debate. If we are to live on potatoes, I think the potato that you're talking about there is the yellow Yukon potato. My question is, what about the sweet purple potatoes? And if we are to live off potatoes, is it just boil with a pinch of salt, or oven bake it, microwave it, we can't deep fry it, but how to do our potatoes?
Well, that's been the criticism of potatoes. You hear some people, learned people, these people should know better, tell you that potatoes cause diabetes. Nonsense. French fried potatoes and potato chips cause diabetes, but not whole potatoes. And the science is clear on that. When you start to get into coloration of potatoes, the more colored they are, the more beta carotene and other carotenoids they supply. Although white potatoes do supply sufficient carotenoids to get by. Again, you go to YouTube and you. In fact, let me just advertise, because I think it's a really fun lecture or discussion I did, and it's about Dr. Michael Greger and his concern about the McDougall diet being protein insufficient and beta carotene insufficient. And I spent an hour explaining why that ain't the case. You'll find that on YouTube. You just put in McDougall and Greger. But white potatoes are great. Like I say, you can, and people have by the millions lived on white potatoes. They've been studied under scientific conditions where people have been locked in metabolic wards for months at a time. In fact, Hinhede did an experiment where one of his subjects lived on potatoes for 1.5 years. But so you can, but the criticism is that more colorful potatoes are better because they have more carotenoids, more beta carotene. And I'm going to argue with that a little bit, but yeah, you're right. Sweet potatoes, if I was going to pick, sometimes I get asked, what would be the ideal diet? If all I was going to learn was just a few sentences from you, what could I live with most productively without reading anything more? You live on a diet of sweet potatoes and green and yellow vegetables, cooked. That would be the diet. 90% of the food comes from sweet potatoes. Boy, you're talking about a real powerful diet that is low enough in protein that it doesn't tax the body, doesn't tax the body. The problem with recommending even the amount consumed by the typical American is it burdens the liver and the kidneys and the bones and causes kidney stones. This is dangerous. And so I know I look at things a little different than other people do, but I'm here to tell you, my patients do well. I'm the luckiest doctor in the world. Is if you unburden your body of this stress, this metabolism of protein, excess protein, you'll do more good for your body than you can imagine. See, the body doesn't store protein. If it stored protein, we'd all look like Arnold Schwarzenegger used to look. It's stored in the muscles. So when you eat more protein than you need, you just need a tiny bit. You need maybe 3 to 5% of your calories as protein. When you eat more than you need, the body has to dispense with it. It has to get rid of it because it can't store it. So it goes through the liver, is metabolized a little, and then it is shunted through the kidneys. And before it gets to the kidneys, it breaks down into amino acids. And these acids, they dissolve the bones and cause osteoporosis. And these bones, they resolidify in the kidneys, and those are what are called kidney stones. and you cause wear and tear on the kidneys that push you towards kidney failure, particularly if you already lost kidney mass. So if I could correct one thing, if one nutrient came under my word to condemn it, it would be protein. It's done more damage to people and the planet than anything else. You have never met a person with protein deficiency ever, but you see people every day all around you who have problems of not only protein excess, but the foods that all this excess protein comes packaged in, like meat and eggs and cheese. But the protein itself, I mean, if you just stripped out the protein and you fed it, as some people recommend, as protein supplements, you'd be dealing with something that's toxic. Anyway, there's a whole lecture I gave, a 4-hour lecture. It's on YouTube. You'll find it without any trouble at all. And I would also encourage you to go to our website, drmcdougall.com, to learn. We've got a lot of information there. And in fact, on the new website, mcdougallfoundation.org, I have some very, very powerful lectures. One was really addresses the subjects that were just asked. One is about how potatoes are the most important food that we have. In 4 hours, I talked about potatoes for 4 hours. And another one was just about how damaging protein is. 4 hours. You want the science, and believe me, I'll provide you the science. You want the rationale and the logic and things that you can observe. You don't have to believe me. You can see it. Attend both of those lectures. They're free. They're at mcdougallfoundation.org.
Thanks, Dr. McDougall. Up next, we have Kathy. Welcome, Kathy.
Hey, hi there. Hi, Dr. McDougall. So I got introduced to you by Steph AJ. And
Kathy, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if you sound a little muffled. Anything you can do about that?
oh, talk closer to my mouthpiece. Can you hear me better now?
That's a little bit better. Thank you.
Wow. I'm in a gym. And actually, that's one of the things that I was going to tell Dr. McDougall is that ever since I started listening to him and Steph AJ and several of the other doctors that she follows, I have changed my lifestyle from a couch potato to more active. So thank you, Dr. McDougall. There's a couple of things though that I want to tell you about. So in the last 3 months, I've lost 40 pounds.
Wow.
I've gone from a 3X to a 1X in size. When I brush my teeth at night, I don't have any of that film on my teeth because I'm eating plant-based. The problem though is that my glucose went up my last lab reading and my thyroid meds are way off. So what do you do? How should I approach that? I mean, I'm eating a lot of sweet potatoes and maybe I shouldn't be. I was pre-diabetic, I think. They never told me, doctors never said this to me, but my A1C.
Well, I'm going to be giving a lecture on Easter Sunday on diabetes and how you cure it. So I'll be presenting a couple hours if you'll attend on my lecture coming up this Sunday. I believe it's the 17th. Anyways, it's Easter Sunday. So
sweet potatoes. Do you think that sweet potatoes are have anything to do with my glucose readings, or do you think that that's all part of just my body adjusting?
No, it's what happens is when you eat, your blood sugar goes up, but what you want to do is you want to cure the disease, so you don't have diabetes anymore, and that's what switching to a starch-based diet does. How often are type 2 diabetics cured by following a starch-based diet and associated weight loss? How often are they cured? 100%. By definition, they're always cured. And I'll talk to you about that on, that's type 2. That's not type 1 or type 1.5. We'll talk about all that on Easter Sunday on the lecture. I think you asked something about thyroid. How do you take care of your thyroid? Well, thyroid problems are really common. And a lot of people are on thyroid medication, and most I find need to be on the medication, but a lot were put on because they were tired or they thought a thyroid would cause them to lose weight, and so the doctor put them on it. But if you need thyroid, you need thyroid. This is a very safe supplement It is a supplement. It takes and replaces the thyroid hormone that your gland lost. Now, what kind of thyroid do I prescribe? This shouldn't surprise you folks. I prescribe Synthroid, levothyroxine, the fake stuff. Why do I prescribe that? Well, because the natural thyroid is made from the thyroid glands of cows and pigs. As a result, you have to worry about the microbes, the viruses, the prions, et cetera, that were in the thyroid glands that you're now eating as a thyroid supplement. Just put your nose in the bottle and smell it. It'll make you switch to Synthroid for sure. Anyway, if the thyroid, this lecture on autoimmune diseases talks about how you develop autoimmune thyroiditis, which is the condition most of you have, which your doctor told you you had. But you're going to have to take a supplement if you need it. And that's based on your TSH level.
Thanks very much for that, Doctor. And up next, we have Rebecca. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you. Speaking of thyroid, my question was, does soy have any negative impacts on the thyroid?
I not that I'm aware of. I mean, there's some theoretical stuff out there about interference of thyroid hormone by eating high soy diets. I did a review on that one time, and I know I came to the conclusion that this is, mostly a theoretical thing, something based on some chemical formulas, but not real people's lives, not people eating soybeans or drinking soy milk or tofu and ending up with any particular problems. No, I've never seen it. I've never seen any research that shows that it really happens to any extent in people. They're called goitrogens, and they're in cruciferous vegetables primarily. But also these goitrogens are in thyroid, and they're chemicals that block the activity of your thyroid gland, but they're so weak, it's just not a problem. It's another one of those dangerous distractions that keep you from focusing on the problem. The problem is the food. The problem is the animals you're eating and the oils you're taking in. That's why you're in trouble. And the solution is to just put starch on your plate. That's where your calories should come from. You're a starch eater. And if the fact that 99.999% of the people who ever walked this earth obtained the bulk of their calories from starch, if that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will. Unfortunately, and I'm sure this is mentioned a lot during these conference days, is industry has a lot to do with skewing the information to sell products. Well, I'm here to tell you that that you got to examine the speaker pretty carefully too, because a lot of doctors can't talk beyond their own dinner plate. Not necessarily in this conference, but when you're out in the real world, when you hear people talking about some things, you ought to look at what they appear to be as far as their health goes. And, I believe you recommend meat and dairy and oil. I believe it. I can see you. It ain't no surprise, folks. Anyway, there's a lot of bias. People love their own food, whatever it is that they eat, they think is right. They can't see beyond their own dinner plate. The doctor is confused. In one hand, he has a paper that says eating meat will kill you, will give you a heart attack and a stroke and cancer. That's in one hand. The other hand, he's got a fork that's stabbing the bacon and shoving it in his mouth. He says, something's wrong here. I must be confused. Anyway, be careful. But you could, what I tried to present to you were things that you don't have to believe. You can see it. When I talk about the Aztecs and the Mayans, you all learned they were the people of the corn. You've lived long enough to remember when Asians lived on rice before 1980. In China, there was virtually no type 2 diabetes and no obesity. Now in China, a full 12% of the Chinese people have real diabetes and half are pre-diabetic. What happened in 40 years? What happened? They got cable news. They got advertisements. They got mass transportation of everything that Americans eat over to China. You've seen this. You know this. You've looked up the calorie count of a potato. You find a potato is 110 calories. What is a teaspoon of oil is 125 calories of calories. You know this. Just stop letting people lead you wrong in the wrong direction. This is simple. The truth is simple and easy to understand. It's simple. It's cost-free. Does no harm to anybody or anything. It's just positive, and the reason that it ought to be positive, and it should be from every point of view, from the point of view of your religion, for your concern about animals' welfare, from your concern about the environment, from avoiding viral infections, from whatever ailments you're seeing the doctor for. It all has to come up positive as true. This is true. And as soon as you start eating a starch-based diet, as 99.99% of people ever walk this earth did, as soon as you do that, as soon as you get that in your mind, everything makes sense. And you lose the 40 pounds, just like one of our callers talked about, in 3 months. This is typical. You should expect these results. You know how on Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers, they give you an example of people and they say this is the best case scenario, don't expect these results. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you follow my advice, you should expect these results because you're going to get it. You're going to get it as often as you'd expect somebody who quits smoking cigarettes to stop coughing, or an alcoholic to stop falling down. How often does that happen? When they stop the booze and they stop the tobacco. How often do they fail to get better? The answer is never. So hold me to it. Write me a note. Tell me, oh, Dr. McDougall, I listened to all your stuff and it sounded so good, but it didn't work. I don't think so.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And just a real quick follow-up, Kathy, who we had on earlier, who brought up the thyroid, she just sent me a direct message. She just wanted to double check. Apparently her thyroid readings are way off. And she's saying that she wanted to hear what and how she goes about changing that. She said, except for blood tests every 2 months and adjusting synthroid levels, she's very frustrated because she's heard too high levels affect bone density, and she's scheduled for a TKR this August. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, all this is true, but food will not bring the thyroid gland back. It's destroyed. It's like if you cut off your arm, you're not going to grow a new arm, no matter how many sweet potatoes you eat. There are certain things that happen to you that are permanent. And the way I treat somebody with thyroid condition, it's based on TSH levels, which her doctors are getting for her, as I adjust the thyroid medication. If you take too much thyroid, you will end up with weaker bones. If you take too little thyroid, well, you can end up pretty darn sick, but it depends on how too little you take. So it's a condition that's easily treated. It's the safest pill I know of is the thyroid supplement. And I use it, I use it all the time in my practice. Not everything is caused by food, just most things.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. And up next, we have Eileen. Welcome, Eileen.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. I'm a big fan of yours. I love your lectures with AJ. And my question is about osteoporosis. I'm a physical therapist, and I feel like everybody and their aunt is coming in with osteopenia. Right. These women in their 40s that look fit and they do yoga. And then, of course, the ones that are a bit older, they do have the kyphosis and they're more fragile. I know your view on the DEXA scan, at least I think I do. What is your view on the drugs? Like, are they ever indicated?
Not in my practice, they're not. Not that I don't use the bisphosphonates, which are the most commonly prescribed. I don't use. I find it unnecessary to use any of the medications because there are very little benefit of excessive cost and side effects. What I do use, though, is I use hormone replacement therapy because estrogen always builds bone back. Well, this is not a religion, folks. It's a matter of doing the best you can to help somebody. I use skin creams as hormone replacement therapy. And this is all discussed on my website, also in a book that I wrote called The McDougall Program for Women. And I also use antacids. I take people who have serious osteoporosis, I mean serious, and I put them on a couple of Tums a day. And what do the Tums do? Well, they're antacids, and they neutralize the dietary acids that are caused by eating animal products. Animal products are high in protein. Proteins are made of amino acids. The amino acids in animal foods are very acidic. They're called sulfur-containing amino acids. They break down to sulfuric acid. So just by, even if it didn't come from the food, just your daily metabolism, you make some acid. So, and when you eat the animal foods, you make just a load of acid that really weakens your bones, because your bones are the primary buffering system of the body. Anyway, that's how I take care of somebody. Is I get them to eat a good diet, low in protein, of course. Get some sunshine. Sunshine's crucial for health, and safe exercise. And then if that's not enough, I'll put them on a couple of Tums a day and hormone replacement therapy. But that's really extreme as far as their bone loss goes. These are people having fractures, not somebody who flunks a bone mineral density test. 70% of women, 70 years of age and beyond, flunk the bone mineral density test. Excuse me? 70% of women have osteopenia or osteoporosis? No, they don't. What happens is this. Is when you're in your reproductive years, you store 2 pounds of minerals in your bones. For the baby, the growth of the fetus, and to breastfeed that baby, you need these minerals. And they're stored in your bones. And then you hit menopause and your body says, well, done with that. Not going to have any more babies. And it dumps the 2 pounds of minerals. And so that's why you flunk the bone mineral density test, because you normally and naturally dump the minerals. Not that the bone strength changes. It doesn't have to. Shouldn't if you take good care of yourself. But what happens is you just, something you reserve for the time when you're making babies, you don't need anymore. That's why 70% of women flunk postmenopausally. It's a bad test. Be careful.
Thanks very much.
It's a bad test in the sense that it's used to hook a whole bunch of people on doctor visits and a bunch of pills and shots and inhalations and all kinds of high profit stuff. It's not that it shouldn't and couldn't be used for some benefit. It's just like early detection of cancers. It's horrible what it does to our population of people, but in some cases it does a lot of good. You just got to know what you're using the test for, and not use it as a large net to cast over unsuspecting people and capture them. It's called disease mongering. It's taking healthy people and turning them into patients. That's what a lot of these tests are about. The bone mineral density tests, your mammograms, your colonoscopies, is taking healthy people and turning them into patients. They better be darn sure it works if they're going to do that, and it doesn't. Do you know that Canada, in 2019, in Canada, their official health doctrine says you do not get a colonoscopy, just like they joined the European countries. It's only the US and a few other countries that recommend colonoscopy for screening for colon cancer. Canadians are lucky. Their government, their health organization said, hey, this is wrong as of 2019. Don't do it. So, and when are we going to catch up? Well, industry is a lot bigger than other places. We're the richest country in the world, and it shows.
Thanks again for that perspective. And let's go now to Tracy. Hi, Tracy.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had a question regarding a thyroid nodule that I've had for a few years. I've started going to a naturopath, and she's got me on progesterone, and I'm taking the estrogen that you can just get over at Costco. And then she just put me on Thyrosin. Are any of these going to help the nodule, or what can I do?
Well, the thyroid hormone will often shrink the nodule. Thyroid, the nodules are formed as a result of overactivity of the thyroid gland because something's wrong. I don't have time to go into the details. So you grow these thyroid nodules, which are common to say the least. And unless they become a cosmetic issue, in other words, you have a big bulge in your neck that you can't stand about in public with, you just leave them alone. They rarely turn into cancer. And there are tests that would help you decide whether there's any possibility of them being cancer. So it's another one of these overtreatment things. But I don't know anything about female hormones like progesterone or estrogen shrinking thyroids, but thyroid hormone will shrink the nodules. It's a common doctor prescribed method. We've been using it for years. For 50 years, we've been using it.
Thanks, doctor. And now we're going to go to, excuse me, George. Welcome, George.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the Real Truth About Health for bringing Dr. McDougall to us. And I want to thank Dr. McDougall for writing the starch solution, because as a vegan, after reading your book, I never have to be worried about being satiated anymore. I have a question. Dr. Michael Grieger says we should be concerned about the arsenic in rice. And you mentioned that the Chinese have been eating rice for thousands of years. Is the arsenic a relatively new problem? Was it always there?
Well,
what causes the arsenic?
Okay, this is based on a Consumers Report article that ended up consuming rice as a very important staple. The reason rice has arsenic in it is because it's grown in soils, like in Louisiana, which were once populated by cotton. And the cotton was infected with boll weevils. And to kill the boll weevils, they used arsenic. So in the days of growing cotton in the South, they contaminated the fields with arsenic. And now when you plant crops on them, the crops will accumulate arsenic. And rice may be a little more efficient than other starches, but not much. Your hyperaccumulators, you talk about the poisonous metals, the cesium and thallium, and about the real serious poisons in the ground. You want to know who the hyperaccumulators are. They're your cruciferous vegetables. They suck up that toxic stuff better than anybody else does. But you don't see anybody worried about that much, do they? And I don't worry about it much either. I mean, you should be eating your green and yellow vegetables. But this whole idea that we need to avoid rice, we need to avoid dirty rice that was grown in dirty soil. And how do you do that? Well, you know, rice grown in other parts of the world besides the United States don't have that problem, or don't have it as much. And California doesn't have it as much either. It's mainly in parts of the world where they grew cotton and had boll weevils, and they had to poison those little boll weevils, and they did it with arsenic.
Thanks very much for that, doctor. And up next, we have Stacy. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, Dr. McDougall. Where are you doing the diabetes thing again on Sunday? Are you doing that on Chef AJ? Or?
It'll be on this. We're doing it on the same forum.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. This is the best conference ever. You guys are just incredible. We love you all. Thank you.
If you can't wait, it's on YouTube.
I literally listen to you like every time you're on Chef AJ, and like every place
it's a real opportunity to be on her show. She's a really important messenger, to say the least. But I'm on her show, Chef AJ, on almost every other Monday. And we have a lot of fun. And I try out my new material on her show. So that, like this coming the 18th, you're going to have to hear a lecture called "Eggs Are for Easter." And I know it's one day late. You know, it's going to be on the 18th, but I felt like it was timely to talk to you guys about eggs and what the problems are and how they're sold and what the politics are behind them. So that's the lecture I'm giving in a few days.
Perfect. I'll share that with my clients. Appreciate it.
I've done one. They're all. I would encourage you to share with people. YouTube's a great thing, except for all the crazy ads that drive you nuts. I did what I did is I'm doing a series of what I would like to do if I was your doctor, what I'd like to tell you, and I don't have that chance. If I was your doctor and you had breast cancer, this is what I want you to know. If you had autoimmune diseases, what I want you to know. If you were overweight, this is what I want you to know. The heart disease, these are the things that would be important before you had heart surgery for you to know. So I've got this whole series that I'm building. And I have, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 lectures up there already of what I would tell you if I had the privilege of being your doctor. And I want you to learn this because you go see the other doctors, they'll have another point of view, I guarantee it. And you need to run what I had to say by them. And you can tell him I said so. You can ask him to watch the YouTube presentation or, read it out of the books and newsletters I've written. I believe me, I have no problem at all. You finding me some challenge from my colleagues. It's been a lifetime of challenge from them. They're fun. They're drug pushers. That's what they are, most of them. There are exceptions. I want to have to tell you, there are a lot, and I know some of you are reacting out there thinking, no, there are a lot of really good doctors. There are a lot of really good medications too, like penicillin. So I know I generalize, but I don't think I'm off base when I tell you that the medical business is dominated by men. So there's a tremendous amount of gender bias, and it's a for-profit business. Hospitals, they're in business. Pharmacies are in business. You think doctors work for free? They're in business. So you better go in as a well-informed customer, because you'll be at mercy to them if you don't take that attitude. You ought to go into them like they were used car salesmen. That's about as much respect as they're owed, as used car salesmen. They're going to trick you every time they get a chance. And maybe not intentionally. Maybe they're all well-intentioned. Let's just assume they are. But the amount of misinformation that goes on because of money, because of research paid by the food industries and research paid for 70% of the research that I read in my journals has a funding by an industry. 70%. So this is the stuff that's happening in your doctor's office. This is what's going through your dietitian's mind. Is propaganda from industry. It's just business. It's not a conspiracy, folks. They're not out to get you. They're out to make money.
And with that, Dr. McDougall, we sure do appreciate that. And actually, so folks, I'm sorry we couldn't get to every last question. It is time for us to get into our evening panel. Dr. McDougall, again, just so grateful that you've come back and shared what you've shared. It's too important for you not to come back and share this with us. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. And we have a world to save. And I certainly gave you the information if you want to act. And those who know have an obligation to act. You now know. So let's get busy, okay? Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. And you know what? I'm not the only one that wants to thank you. We're going to have our tech team unmute our entire audience. What does everybody want to say to Dr. John McDougall?
All right.
Thank you, Dr. McDougall.